There's a moment burned into the memory of anyone who grew up in the MTV. Not a riff, not a drum hit. A flash of candy apple red slicing through neon shadows, rolling in slow motion like it wasn't a car at all, more like a signal, a pulse. A warning that something outrageous had just entered pop culture and wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. People remember the music videos, the women stepping out of nowhere, the way the band appeared like time-traveling gatekeepers. But behind all of that spectacle, there was always one constant, a low-slung 33 Ford Coupe that somehow looked older than history and newer than tomorrow at the same time. It didn't just show up on screen, it took over the frame. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The Eliminator wasn't built for speed. It wasn't built for comfort. It wasn't even built for the band. It was built for an illusion, an engineered myth designed to survive cameras, deadlines, and the chaos of rock and roll storytelling. But myths always leave fingerprints, and this one left plenty. So if you love strange automotive origins, backstage chaos, and the kind of mechanical wizardry Hollywood hopes you'll never ask about, settle in. We're about to follow a trail of 20 bizarre clues that reveal the real Eliminator, piece by piece. Number 20. The clone that confused an entire generation. For decades, fans swore they had seen the Eliminator in person. At concerts, at exhibitions, sometimes even parked behind random arenas like a rock star catching its breath. But here's the twist. Half the time, they weren't looking at the Eliminator at all. They were staring at its clone, a meticulously crafted double-built because the original simply couldn't survive the brutal travel schedule of global touring. What makes this story bizarre isn't the existence of a clone. Hollywood clones cars all the time. What's strange is how perfect this one was. People who had studied the original down to the curve of its candy red paint couldn't tell the difference. Even seasoned hot rod builders admitted the twin was unnerving, too accurate, too alive, too willing to stand in the spotlight, as if it were the real celebrity. And so the question lingered. When a fake becomes indistinguishable from the real thing, does authenticity even matter anymore? Number 19. The music video death no fan ever recovered from. If the Eliminator had a heartbeat, it stopped the day MTV aired Sleeping Bag. In one of the strangest creative decisions of the era, the band allowed their signature hot rod to be crushed, flattened on camera by massive wheel loaders as if the car were nothing more than an expendable prop. Fans didn't gasp, they froze. They rewound the tape again and again, convinced it had to be a trick, a camera illusion, anything but the unthinkable. But the destruction was real. Metal buckled. Panels collapsed. The Eliminator, the car that had defined a cultural moment, was shown dying in a way that felt uncomfortably final. Then came the second twist. Its resurrection. A futuristic, almost sci-fi version of the car appeared for the next album cycle, reborn like a mechanical phoenix. The logic didn't matter. The symbolism did. The Eliminator wasn't just a machine anymore. It had become a myth that could be killed and brought back. Number 18. A rusted shell. Hiding a cultural time bomb. Before it lit up television screens, the Eliminator didn't sit on a showroom floor or inside a polished garage. It sat in silence, half sunken into the earth, stripped of dignity, forgotten in a field that didn't care what decade it belonged to. People who passed by didn't see potential, they saw scrap metal. Something to ignore. Something that would never run again. But that's the eerie part. Under layers of rust and neglect was a shape that had once defined an entire era of American design. The bones were still there, the curve of the fenders, the stubborn stance of a pre-war coupe refusing to disappear. Whoever first spotted it didn't just find a car, they unearthed a dormant cultural weapon waiting to explode. It's strange how icons begin. Not with fanfare, not with celebration. Sometimes with a carcass in a field, hiding a future no one could have predicted. If this shell had been scrapped a week earlier, MTV history might have been missing its most recognizable silhouette. Number 17. The 3-inch cut that changed MTV forever. Hot rod builders argue about many things, but nearly all agree on one truth. A roof chop is an act of controlled violence. You measure, You breathe, and then you slice into a vintage body, knowing there's no undo button. The Eliminator took a 3-inch reduction, just 3 inches, yet that decision reshaped its entire destiny. Lowering the roof didn't just alter the stance, it transformed the coupe into something predatory. Something that looked fast even when parked under studio lights. On MTV, this silhouette became instantly recognizable. Viewers didn't know about the hours of metalwork, the geometry nightmares, the windows that had to be recut with surgeon-level precision. They only saw a creature born lower, meaner, and impossibly sleek. The band didn't need the car to talk. The roofline did all the talking. 3 inches of missing metal. And suddenly an obscure 33 Ford looked like it belonged in a neon-drenched future that hadn't even arrived yet. Number 16, a Frankenstein hood built by bare hands. Most people assume the Eliminator's hood came from some forgotten parts bin or a rare aftermarket catalog. The truth is stranger. It was sculpted, piece by piece, like a creature stitched together in a back alley laboratory. A 3-section design, flanked by scooped side panels shaped not for vanity but for survival in the heat of a V8. What makes the hood so unsettling isn't just its look. It's the fact that every curve, every rise, every line had to be shaped by human hands before computer-aided design existed. Metal was heated, hammered, cooled, reshaped, rejected, and hammered again until it matched the silhouette living in the builder's imagination. No shortcuts, no templates. Just instinct and a torch. That's why the hood feels alive on camera. It wasn't manufactured, it was forged. A functional piece of artwork that looks like it crawled out of a welding bench with a personality of its own. Number 15, when Ford body met Chevy heart. Some purists still flinch when they hear the truth. Beneath that iconic red shell beats a Chevy small block V8. Not a Ford, not a flathead. A full-blooded Chevrolet heart transplanted into a pre-war Ford body like a mechanical scandal waiting to be exposed. But here's the twist few people acknowledge. This wasn't blasphemy, it was survival. The band needed reliability, instant starts after long flights, and a powertrain that wouldn't melt down during tours. The Chevy 350 was the most dependable workhorse of its era. Cheap to repair, easy to tune, and parts available in nearly every corner of America. When you pair a Ford shell with a Chevy engine, you're not breaking rules. You're writing new ones, and whether purists like it or not, that hybrid soul helped the Eliminator stay alive long enough to become something bigger than brand loyalty. A cultural artifact built from whatever worked best. Number 14, the automatic transmission. Nobody expected. Rock and roll mythology teaches us to expect violence. Clutch kicks, gear grinding, engines screaming for mercy. So when fans learned the Eliminator wasn't rowing through gears but cruising with a turbo 350 automatic, they felt betrayed? Confused? Maybe both. But the truth is more grounded and stranger. This car wasn't built for racetracks or quarter-mile bragging rights. It was built for entrances, promotional drives, slow-motion cruises past crowds who weren't there to judge horsepower. They were there for the moment. And nothing kills a moment faster than a stalled manual in front of reporters. The automatic wasn't a compromise, it was strategy. A seamless, bulletproof transmission that allowed anyone, from band members to exhausted crew, to slip behind the wheel and look effortlessly cool. While other hot rods fought their drivers, the Eliminator glided. Because sometimes the most rock and roll thing you can do is refuse to struggle. Number 13, a suspension system built for cameras, not tracks. Underneath the Eliminator's candy red skin lies a contradiction. A chassis engineered not for racing glory, but for visual dominance. Up front sits a dropped tube axle, classic hot rod posture. Out back, a rugged Ford 9-inch rear end, famous for surviving abuse that would cripple lesser setups. But here's the twist. Together, these components weren't chosen for speed. They were chosen for balance. The kind that keeps a car photogenic from every angle, whether idling under studio lights or rolling past a camera truck at walking pace. The low nose gives the Eliminator its predatory silhouette. The 4-bar suspension setup keeps the body composed, preventing awkward bounce that ruins a shot. This wasn't a car engineered for trophies. It was engineered for iconography. A machine whose real racetrack was the camera lens, where stability and attitude mattered far more than lap times. Number 12. The candy apple paint that became a cultural logo. Some cars are remembered for engines, others for speed. The Eliminator? It's remembered for a color, not just red, an impossible molten shade of candy apple that doesn't behave like paint at all. Under the sun, it glows. Under neon, it vibrates. On MTV, it looked radioactive, like someone poured liquid chrome and fire into the same bucket and prayed the mixture wouldn't explode. What few people realized is that this wasn't a simple paint job. It was alchemy. Multiple layers, each one deepening the illusion that the car was lit from inside. Cameras loved it. Album covers worshipped it. Every reflection, every highlight, every micro-curve of the body became part of a visual brand so strong that the color alone started doing the advertising. You didn't need to see the band. You didn't even need to see the whole car. One flash of that red, and your brain whispered, "That's the Eliminator." It stopped being a paint color. It became a signature, one more recognizable than most corporate logos. Number 11. A name borrowed from the drag strip. While the world assumed Eliminator was some slick marketing invention, hot rod veterans recognized it instantly. The name comes straight from drag racing vocabulary, a word used to describe classes where competitors are knocked out one by one until only a single victor remains. Choosing that name wasn't an accident. It was a declaration, a statement that this car wasn't here to participate in pop culture. It was here to survive it, to outlast trends, to withstand the chaos of touring, the scrutiny of fans, the harsh judgment of builders who examined every weld and curve. The irony is delicious. The Eliminator was never meant to dominate racetracks, yet it ended up eliminating everything that stood in the way of its myth. Album cycles shifted, fashion changed, MTV reinvented itself, bands rose and fell. But the car remained. Its name wasn't a description, it was a prophecy. Number 10. The album cover that turned a hot rod into a mascot. When the Eliminator first appeared on the cover of ZZ Top's 1983 album, something unusual happened. The car didn't just complement the artwork, it hijacked it. Instead of sitting quietly behind the band, the coupe lunged forward like a red streak ripping through space, framed against a surreal gradient of purples and neon haze. This wasn't a background element anymore, it was the face of the album, the ambassador, the mascot. Millions of copies circulated across living rooms, record shops, and bedrooms of teenagers who had never even seen a hot rod in person. Yet they recognized this one instantly. The Eliminator became the visual hook that lured people into the music, a silent promise that whatever was inside that sleeve would be unapologetically loud, unapologetically American, and unapologetically cool. Most cars die quietly when their era ends. The Eliminator secured immortality by doing something no other hot rod had done. It sold an album by simply existing. Number 9. The MTV trilogy that made the car immortal. Most cars are lucky to get a cameo in one music video. The Eliminator starred in 3, Gimme All Your Lovin', Sharp Dressed Man, and Legs, a trilogy of neon-soaked, attitude-heavy mini-movies that defined the look and swagger of early MTV. But here's the secret. The car wasn't treated as a prop. It was written like a character. Whenever it appeared, something changed. A loser found confidence, a villain backed down, a scene shifted from ordinary to electric. The Eliminator didn't just transport the band, it transported the story. And MTV noticed. The more the videos aired, the more the car began to detach from the band's identity and grow its own mythos. Kids drew it in their notebooks. Fans rewatched the tapes just to catch its entrance. Builders tried to copy it, never quite capturing the attitude tucked inside its stance. The trilogy didn't elevate the Eliminator, it canonized it, a holy relic of the music video age. Number 8. The rebirth that no one saw coming. You would think crushing a cultural icon on camera would be the end of the story. A closed chapter, a dramatic farewell. But the Eliminator refused to stay dead. After its on-screen demolition in Sleeping Bag, fans mourned, theorized, and argued about whether the footage was real. Then, out of nowhere, the band unveiled a successor, a futuristic, aerospace-inspired hot rod for the afterburner era. Sleek, angular, more spaceship than coupe. It didn't replace the Eliminator, it continued its mythology. This wasn't a simple redesign, it was a resurrection written in sheet metal and neon, a message that the Eliminator wasn't bound by time, technology, or even physical destruction. The car had transcended its chassis. It had become an idea, something that could evolve with the band, warp with trends, and survive cultural extinction events. Most machines die when they are crushed. This one came back sharper, louder, and stranger. A phoenix forged from steel and synthesizers. Number 7, a still-running relic, defying time. Some celebrity cars become museum pieces, frozen behind velvet ropes, their engines never to roar again. The Eliminator refused that fate. Decades after conquering MTV, after world tours, after magazine covers and endless public appearances, the car still runs. Not as a pampered show queen, but as a functioning hot rod that occasionally prowls the streets under Billy Gibbons' hand. There's something eerie about that. A pre-war coupe, older than most of its fans' parents, still alive, still rumbling, still capable of leaving black streaks on asphalt if asked politely. Mechanically, it shouldn't be possible. Age deforms metal. Time corrodes wiring. Fame usually destroys machines long before rust does. Yet the Eliminator persists, like it's feeding on the very nostalgia it helped create. Seeing it drive today is like watching a ghost choose not to haunt, but to cruise. A reminder that legends don't fade. They idle patiently, waiting for someone to turn the key. Number 6. Showmanship over speed, a radical philosophy. In the culture of hot rods, speed is scripture. Builders brag about horsepower, quarter-mile times, dyno sheets, and engines tuned to the edge of destruction. But the Eliminator? It rejected that religion entirely. Instead of raw numbers, it was engineered for presence, for silhouette, for impact. It didn't need to run a 9-second quarter mile. It needed to roll past crowds at 5 miles an hour and make every single person turn their head. The band understood something veteran builders often forget. Speed fades, but style echoes. A 1,000-horsepower engine sitting backstage won't make you a legend. A perfectly composed entrance will. The Eliminator wasn't built to win races. It was built to win moments. And in the MTV era, where the camera was the real racetrack, that philosophy made it unstoppable. By prioritizing visual dominance over mechanical aggression, the Eliminator broke every rule of traditional hot rodding and became the most successful rule breaker of its generation. Number 5, a mashup of eras that shouldn't work, but did. Look closely and the Eliminator becomes a paradox on wheels, a 1930s body, mid-century hot rod traditions, 80s neon aesthetics, modern engineering tucked underneath. It shouldn't work. In fact, design textbooks would tell you it couldn't. Cars tied to multiple eras usually look confused, like they're arguing with themselves. But the Eliminator blended timelines the way a DJ blends samples, making something new by colliding pieces of the past. Depression-era curves met Reagan-era swagger. Pre-war steel met postmodern angles. The result wasn't steampunk, retro-futurism, or classic Americana. It was all of them, mashed together with a confidence that dared you to question it. That's why decades later the car still feels timeless. It doesn't belong to one decade, it belongs to every decade it touched. The Eliminator wasn't simply designed, it was remixed, and like all great remixes, it outlived the trends that created it. Number 4, the car that bridged two cultures. Before the Eliminator hit MTV, hot rods lived mostly in garages, local cruise nights, and dusty car show parking lots. They were niche artifacts, respected, loved, but undeniably underground. Then the Eliminator roared across television screens, and overnight, a subculture became a movement. Millions of viewers who had never smelled race fuel or heard the snap of a carburetor suddenly fell in love with a style of car they didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, longtime builders, men who had spent decades welding, chopping, and tuning, found themselves watching MTV because a 33 Ford Coupe had become the unexpected ambassador of their world. The Eliminator didn't just bridge music and cars, it bridged lifestyle and identity. It turned gearheads into music fans and music fans into gearheads. For one brief, brilliant moment, the entire country seemed to agree on what cool looked like. And that silhouette, the low roof, the candy red glow, the impossible attitude, became the handshake between two cultures that rarely crossed paths. Number 3. A dual fandom phenomenon. After the Eliminator's rise, car shows began noticing something strange. Crowds were changing. People who had never owned a hot rod, never rebuilt a carb, never touched a wrench were suddenly attending events just to see that car. Music fans, drawn by nostalgia and MTV memories, stood shoulder to shoulder with lifelong builders who had gasoline in their veins. And even stranger, both groups respected each other. Hot rod traditionalists admired the craftsmanship, the welds, the stance, the metalwork. Music fans were mesmerized by the iconography, the memories, the cinematic aura surrounding the car. They weren't speaking the same language, yet somehow they were having the same conversation. It's rare for a machine to unite two entirely different tribes. Rarer still to do it without trying. But the Eliminator managed the impossible. It wasn't just loved, it was claimed, by two fandoms who saw themselves reflected in its curves, its swagger, and its myth. That crossover wasn't an accident. It was the moment the car stopped being a prop and became a cultural phenomenon. Number 2, a survivor from a vanished era. Pre-war coupes are ghosts now. Most were scrapped during wartime metal drives, wrecked in backyard races, or rusted into the ground long before MTV was even an idea. The fact that any 1933 Ford Coupe survived into the modern era is incredible. But for one of them to not only endure, but rise to global fame is almost mathematically impossible. Think of the odds stacked against it. Decades of neglect, a near-death existence in an open field, a rebuild that could have gone wrong at any moment, a cultural landscape that had no reason to elevate a pre-war relic. Yet somehow, this forgotten skeleton of American steel crossed time like a message in a bottle. It survived eras that swallowed entire brands, entire design languages, entire philosophies of what cars were supposed to be. By the time MTV pointed a camera at it, the Eliminator wasn't just old, it was a relic from a world that no longer existed. And that's precisely what made it unforgettable. It carried history in its frame and destiny in its stance. Number 1, the impossible journey from scrap to icon. If every legend has an origin, then the Eliminator's is the most improbable of them all. A rusted-out corpse in a field, rising to become one of the most recognizable machines in American pop culture. Most cars never escape the place they die. This one didn't just escape, it reinvented itself. Through hands that reshaped its steel, through music videos that turned its silhouette into mythology, through album covers that projected its image into millions of homes, the Eliminator transcended the very idea of what a car could be. It stopped being a mode of transportation. It stopped being a hot rod. It even stopped being a band mascot. It became a symbol of reinvention, of rebellion, of impossible second chances. And that's why its journey resonates long after the engines cool and the neon fades. Because deep down, everyone recognizes a little of themselves in a machine that was abandoned, underestimated, nearly erased, yet somehow found its way into immortality. And now that we've reached the end of these 20 strange, twisted, unbelievable clues, there's one truth left standing. The Eliminator was never supposed to survive. Not the decades of abandonment, not the rebuilds, not the touring demands, not the crushing weight of cultural expectation. Yet somehow, it did more than survive, it became the defining silhouette of an entire generation. What other machine has lived this kind of life? Born in rust, reborn in fire, immortalized in neon. A relic of the 30s that conquered the 80s and refuses to stay quiet even now. Before we close the book on this mechanical legend, here's a question worth asking. Which moment shaped the Eliminator the most? Its rediscovery in a forgotten field? Its resurrection after being crushed on camera? Or the instant its candy apple glow first hit an MTV lens and rewired pop culture forever? And while you're thinking about that, if stories like this hit the same nostalgic nerve for you, Stories about machines with past lives, strange detours, and impossible returns, feel free to join us for the next one. There are dozens more legends buried in garages, scrapyards, movie sets, and memories. Some of them are hiding in plain sight. So subscribe if you'd like to keep digging with us. Drop a comment about which fact surprised you most. Because myth-making isn't a one-way street. It's a conversation between the storyteller, the machine, and you. The Eliminator's engine may quiet down between appearances, but its story? That part never stops running.